Yeah, so I'll just hit, best practices. This is, typically, we do a little poll of, hey, what do you want to hear Josh and Dmitriy talk about? And there's always two things. Hey, we want to do Q&A, so we're going to fly through this to try to give people some Q&A. But then also it's security best practices. So I just listed out in no particular order really, but something that I even threw in the chat there when the question was, hey, if I could do something in the next month, like what would it be? And MFA, we agree on that. That's the most important. But to me as well, if you can slow down enough to do some data identification, and what I mean by that is a lot of times I'll talk to businesses and they'll say, well, Josh, I have nothing of interest. Nobody wants anything from me. I don't have intellectual property. I don't store credit card data. Well, no, but you have employees, right? Yeah, well, you probably onboarded them and now you have an application that has social security information. You have first name, last name, address, email address, phone number. Like you have data, you have customer data too. And a lot of times they don't even know where that exists. So you have to do data identification and figure out what is the data that you have that is of importance and where does it exist. So then you can basically build, the crunchy outside, or you can build the castle around that data and put in roles and responsibilities around that. People need to move to a next generation endpoint, whether that's, you want to call it machine learning or artificial intelligence, but there's a lot of different products out there on the market today. Sentinel-1, there's Silence out there. Like you need to move towards that off of a signature-based AV. So I would implore everybody to take a look at that. Control admins, right? You don't want to give people a local admin or domain admin. You should not be running if you're a network administrator, your normal log on. If it's, Joshua, .s, I should not be logging on as domain admin every single day. I should have my own separate domain admin. I shouldn't have local admin rights to my own computer. I should have to then type that back in. Most of these executables that you could potentially download that are malicious are going to require you to have administrative rights to run. If you don't grant them that access, then they can never run in the first place. Vulnerability management, patch management, we've talked about that ad nauseum, but I'm a firm believer in what's called continuous vulnerability management. I have not coined that term, but I'm telling you that it's coming and we need to be looking at that. Same with patch management, something we talk about, Dmitriy hit on a little bit, but that's like the lesser evil. What is worse? Patching in production a vulnerability and you break prod, or not even patching a vulnerability and now somebody gets in. There's some balance of a risk assessment, a risk analysis that you have to do from a business perspective to say, what is my risk of somebody actually getting this vulnerability? From a Hafnium perspective, that was like a patch immediately because, again, as Dmitriy touched on, we can't just say, hey, everybody give me your IP address that you're going to come from when you want to get to the Exchange server. It doesn't work that way, right? It has to be open to the internet. But now if you have something internally that might be segmented that, is vulnerable, you don't necessarily have to run off and patch that immediately. You can burn that in a dev environment and test it. But that's not always going to be the case. So you do have to weigh that. There is some risk analysis there, but we really need to be mindful of that.
Josh, if I may jump
yeah,
in,
go ahead.
My kind of rule of thumb is if it's internet facing and it deals with credentials, it deals with authentication, it has keys to the kingdom, patch it immediately. Like, just don't look back, patch it immediately. If it's a VPN system, if it's Exchange, if it's web servers don't really deal. Web servers are obviously sensitive, they're internet facing, but they don't typically hold the keys to the kingdom, right? So therefore they're on a different tier. They're a whole different strategies for patching web servers, and especially if you're using containers, there's a whole mentality of, are they pets or are they a herd? In other words, you take careful care of your pets. Those are your servers, special servers. And then you have cattle, where you just cattle, you have a farm of cattle and you don't really care about any individual one. So web servers are a different thing, but things like Exchange, VPN servers, anything that grants access, anything that has admin, that can be exploited for further access, patch immediately. Like that's a no-brainer.
I 100% agree with that. And also then jump over to the right, network segmentation. Anything that's public facing needs to be in its own network zone that's isolated away with very limited to no access to anything else internally. Because if I can pound on it from it externally and then I get in, you should make it very hard, if not impossible, for somebody to jump from that device into someplace else in the network. So make sure you have really good network segmentation. Firewall management, making sure you have good firewall management policies in place, making sure that you just don't open up any inbound to a server because you're really not sure how to do it, and or you're not sure what port you need at that point in time. Also, outbound ACLs. I think back last year or 2 years ago, the SonicWall Cyber Threat Report said that 20% of all breaches were because of outbound ports that were open, right? We need to make sure we're doing a better job with that. And that kind of comes in a cyclical thing. It used to be lockdown ports, and it was now just focused on applications. Now it's back to lockdown ports, right? Don't make anything easy on the hacker. Make it difficult. If you make it difficult, most times they're going to go away, right? I look at it like if you lock your door at night, and there was some stat, a couple years ago that locked doors basically control, basically reduce burglaries by 95%. What that means is that, out of 100 times, 95 times somebody comes up and they wiggle the door and they see the door's locked, they just walk away. So if you do the easy things and quote unquote, lock your doors, most times people are just going to walk away from your network because they're just going to move on to something else that's easy. Go to Cerdant.io, type in remote desktop. You'll see right now there's almost 4 million open RDP sessions in the world right now. No naked RDP. I know this just kills Dmitry. No naked RDP. Anything that's going to be remote access, again, Shodan, 4 million open RDP servers out there that you can get into, or desktops, VPN for anything remote access. Do you want to talk on that, or you just?
No,
like
that's
I don't know. So I feel like we've talked ad nauseum on.
Yeah. There was another topic. You just keep going. I'll come back to one of the things that you said. I want to.
Add external to the stamp of your email. It seems very simple. There's a 50% less likelihood that somebody will actually succumb to a phishing attack if external is added to emails. Almost any email system can do that today. Make sure you do that. If you're a larger organization, make sure you're doing a monthly review of your directory services like Active Directory. A lot of times hacks happen because somebody leaves, or there's a stale account that gets left out there, and maybe you have a services account that you unfortunately gave too much access to, and then you click the little button that says, don't require me to reset password, and it's 5 years later, and that service account gets popped, and you never know about it. So larger organizations do a monthly review. That can even be tied into HR when an employee leaves. If you're smaller organizations, at least do a quarterly review. Again, they'll help make it an HR function. And then user role management. That kind of goes back to the zero trust stuff that we're talking about. I'm talking really quickly about this stuff, but user role management is making sure that if Dmitry's a developer, he doesn't need access to the confidential shared drive that has access into payroll and everything else. So make sure that you're using proper user role management so employees only have access to the things that they need. And a lot of times in businesses, what happens is you fire up a username, you add some people to some groups, you walk away, and accidentally people have access to way too much stuff than what they need to do their normal day-to-day job. You had a comment, Dmitry?
Yeah, you said about removing the easy access. For that analogy, I like to use the joke where two guys run into a bear in the woods, and one of them starts tying his shoelaces, and the other one says, "What are you doing? Like, we got to get away." And he's like, "Yeah, I just have to outrun you." Right? It's the same thing with security. It's if SVR or if any of the groups that have panda or bear in their name want to get in, they'll get in. Sorry. But what you don't want is you don't want the script kiddies, the copycats, the opportunists that are looking for some Bitcoin or for some info that are just downloading scripts, running it. They read about they watched a video or they read on a forum how to do this. They're trying it out. Those are the ones that you don't want to fall a victim to those. Even the more sophisticated ones that might tailor it a little bit, but they're not at the level of sophistication of, again, the pandas and the bears. That's what a lot of what Josh said is it removes that, it just raises the bar where it's not you, right? The MFA, we talked about that. The external stamp to email, such a stupidly easy thing to do. And yet it has so much ROI because when people are just on autopilot looking at their email, and by the way, I can spoof the email to come from whoever I want it to come from. Like I can put an email in your inbox from, you tell me who you want it to be from, I'll put it in there, right? And it'll look legit. until you open up the headers. And that's what that email, that's what that stamp will do, is it'll say it's from the CEO of the company, but it's an external email, right? That already makes people take a pause and think about what they're about to do. Josh, a lot of what you talked about, users and auditing the directory services or not sharing like admin passwords and admin, that all falls under the category of privileged account management, right? Your privileged account, again, think of that chaos monkey principle, right? Take your favorite admin, not Josh, right? But take your favorite admin, and tomorrow he leaves in disgust and he's angry and whatever, right? What's your damage, right? A worst case scenario, San Francisco had this incident, right? Where an admin locks out the network. Can they do that, right? What sort of, just use those principles of like chaos monkey from not only from a technology point of view, but also from human. If you don't, if you have the same shared password between 5 different people for administering a device, and somebody screws something up, or somebody, whatever, becomes a bad actor, an insider, right? Can you tell who it was? Or do they have plausible deniability now because it was a shared password?